The afternoon sun blazed through the drawing-room windows, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Eleanor stood perfectly still while her stepmother circled her like a hungry wolf. Lady Ashworth's sharp eyes swept over Eleanor's plain grey dress with open disgust. "Look at you," Lady Ashworth said, her voice cut like broken glass. 26 years old, and still unmarried. You shame this entire family." Eleanor kept her eyes on the floor. Her hands trembled at her sides, but she clasped them together to hide it. She had learned long ago that responding only made things worse. "Even the poorest merchant's daughter has found a husband by your age." Lady Ashworth stopped in front of Eleanor and lifted her chin with one cold finger. "But you? Nothing. Not even a single offer." Eleanor's two stepsisters giggled from their seats by the window. Judith, the older one, was beautiful with golden hair and blue eyes. Margaret, the younger, was almost as pretty. They both wore fine silk gowns in cheerful colors. They both had suitors who called regularly. They both made sure Eleanor knew how lucky they were. Perhaps if she smiled more, Judith suggested sweetly. Her voice dripped with false kindness. "No man wants a wife who looks so serious all the time." "A smile cannot fix that face," Margaret added. She examined her perfect nails. "Some girls are simply born unfortunate." Lady Ashworth released Eleanor's chin with a small push. Eleanor stumbled back a step. Her heart pounded hard in her chest, but she refused to let tears come. She had cried enough over the years. Now her eyes stayed dry even when her heart broke. "Go to the kitchen," Lady Ashworth commanded. "Cook needs help preparing dinner. At least make yourself useful, since you cannot make yourself presentable." Eleanor curtsied and left the room quickly. Behind her, she heard her stepsisters laughing. The sound followed her down the hallway like cruel ghosts. She had lived in this house for 15 years, ever since her father married Lady Ashworth. He had died just 3 years later, leaving Eleanor alone with a family that hated her. In the kitchen, Eleanor found peace. Cook was a kind woman with grey hair and gentle hands. She smiled when Eleanor entered and handed her a bowl of peas to shell. "Don't mind them, dear," Cook whispered. "They speak with venom because they have nothing sweet inside." Eleanor smiled weakly. She sat at the wooden table and began working. Her fingers moved quickly, snapping open the pods and collecting the small green peas. This was her real life. She cooked and cleaned and sewed. She did the work of a servant in what had once been her father's house. But Eleanor was not broken. Deep inside, where no one could see, she kept a small flame of hope burning. She remembered her mother's words from long ago, before sickness took her. "True beauty," her mother had said, "lives in how we treat others. Never let cruelty make you cruel." So Eleanor chose kindness. She helped the servants when they struggled. She fed the stray cats that wandered the garden. She saved small pieces of bread from her meals and left them for the birds. In these tiny acts, she found purpose. 50 miles away, in a grand estate called Thornfield Manor, a different kind of suffering lived. Count Sebastian Winters stood at the window of his study. He could not see the beautiful grounds that surrounded his home. He could not see the ancient oak trees or the rose gardens his mother had loved. He could not see anything at all. 3 years ago, a riding accident had stolen his sight and changed everything. The doctors had tried every treatment they knew. Nothing worked. Sebastian lived now in permanent darkness, and the darkness had seeped into his soul. "My lord," his butler Harrison said softly from the doorway, "your aunt, Lady Pembroke, has arrived." Sebastian sighed. He knew why she had come. She came every week with the same lecture. He turned from the window, though he could not see it anyway. The habit remained even when the purpose was gone. Show her in. Moments later, his aunt swept into the room. Sebastian heard the rustle of her expensive gown and smelled her lavender perfume. She kissed his cheek, then sat in the chair across from his desk. "Sebastian, we must speak seriously," she began without preamble. "Must we?" Sebastian sat in his own chair. He folded his hands on the desk. "I can guess what you will say. You have said it every week for months. Then why have you not listened?" Her voice sharpened. "You are 32 years old. You need an heir. The title must continue." Sebastian's jaw tightened. What woman would want a blind husband? I cannot dance with her. I cannot admire her gowns. I cannot even see her face. "Many women would want to be Countess Winters," his aunt replied firmly. "Your title is ancient and respected. Your fortune is substantial. Your lands are vast. These things matter more than your eyesight. So I should marry someone who wants my money and title, but not me." Bitterness filled Sebastian's voice. "That sounds like a wonderful life." Lady Pembroke was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke more gently. "You are lonely, Sebastian. I see it every time I visit. This house is too quiet. You sit in your study all day with only servants for company. Is this how you want to live the rest of your life?" Her words hit harder than Sebastian wanted to admit. She was right. He was desperately lonely. Before the accident he had been different. He had loved riding and hunting and attending balls. He had enjoyed parties and conversation and the company of friends. Now he hid in his house like a ghost, afraid to face the world that could see him when he could not see it. "What do you suggest?" he asked tiredly. "Let me arrange a marriage," Lady Pembroke said. "Not a love match. We will be practical. We will find a woman of good family who needs what you can offer. In exchange, she will give you companionship and eventually an heir. It need not be a fairy tale. It simply needs to be sensible." Sebastian wanted to refuse. Every part of him rebelled against the idea. But another part, the part that woke up each morning to endless darkness and silence, whispered that perhaps his aunt was right. Perhaps some companionship, even without love, was better than this terrible loneliness. "One condition," he said finally. "Name it. I want a portrait of her before the wedding. I know I cannot see it, but I want to know that somewhere there exists an image of the woman I will marry. Something real. Something that proves she is not just a voice in the darkness." Lady Pembroke smiled, though Sebastian could not see it. "That is a reasonable request. I will arrange everything." After she left, Sebastian sat alone in his study. The house felt emptier than ever. He listened to the clock ticking on the mantel. Time kept moving forward, whether he could see it or not. Perhaps it was time to move forward too, even if he stumbled in the darkness. 3 weeks later, Lady Ashworth received a letter that changed everything. She read it at breakfast while Eleanor served tea. Suddenly, Lady Ashworth looked up with an expression Eleanor had never seen before. It was not quite happiness. It was more like a cat that had caught a particularly fat mouse. "Eleanor," Lady Ashworth said slowly, "come here." Eleanor approached cautiously. Good news for Lady Ashworth usually meant bad news for her. "It seems you have finally found a purpose," Lady Ashworth continued. She waved the letter. "Count Sebastian Winters is seeking a wife. His aunt, Lady Pembroke, has contacted several families. She wants someone of good birth who will not make demands, someone quiet and manageable." Eleanor's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. "I have accepted on your behalf," Lady Ashworth announced. "You will marry the Count in 2 weeks." "But I have never even met him," Eleanor protested weakly. "You should be grateful anyone wants you at all," Judith snapped, "even if he is blind." "Blind?" Eleanor repeated. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Yes, blind, Lady Ashworth said, dismissively. He lost his sight in an accident 3 years ago. He is a recluse now, but his title is excellent and his fortune is vast. You will live well, and more importantly, you will finally be out of my house. Margaret laughed meanly. Imagine, she gets a count while being so plain, only because he cannot see what she looks like. Eleanor felt dizzy. She gripped the edge of the table. Marriage to a stranger. A blind stranger who lived as a recluse. She would leave this house of cruelty. But what would she find in its place? There is one unusual request, Lady Ashworth continued. The Count wants a portrait painted of you before the wedding. Something about wanting a record of his bride. It is a strange whim, but we will accommodate it. The next day, a portrait painter arrived at the house. He was a thin man with grey hair and kind eyes. He set up his easel in the drawing room and asked Eleanor to sit by the window. Try to relax, he said gently. This will take several hours. Eleanor sat as still as she could. The painter studied her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She was used to people looking away from her, not looking at her so carefully. You have interesting features, the painter said after a while. Not conventional beauty, perhaps, but there is something compelling about your face. A sadness in the eyes, a strength in the jaw. No one had ever spoken about her face with such neutrality before. Usually people either insulted her appearance or ignored it entirely. The painter seemed to see her as simply a subject to capture, neither beautiful nor ugly, just human. As he worked, Eleanor found herself thinking about the Count. What kind of man orders a portrait of a woman he will never see? Was it pride, vanity, or was it something else? Was it perhaps a desire to connect with a world he could no longer access? For the first time, Eleanor wondered if perhaps the Count was lonely too. The portrait took 3 days to complete. Eleanor never saw the finished painting. Lady Ashworth had it wrapped and sent to Thornfield Manor immediately. Eleanor tried to ask what it looked like, but the painter had already left. The wedding day arrived like a storm that could not be stopped. Eleanor wore a simple white gown that Lady Ashworth had purchased. It was pretty, but not extravagant. Lady Ashworth had no intention of spending more than necessary on a stepdaughter she despised. A carriage arrived to take Eleanor to Thornfield Manor. The wedding would be held in the Count's private chapel with only a few witnesses. This was not a celebration, it was a transaction. Eleanor's hands shook as the carriage rolled through the countryside. She had brought only 2 small bags with her few possessions. Everything she owned fit easily in the carriage. She was leaving behind a life of misery, but she had no idea what she was moving toward. Thornfield Manor appeared as the sun began setting. It was beautiful and enormous. Grey stone walls rose 3 stories high. Windows glinted in the fading light. Gardens stretched in every direction. Eleanor had never seen such a grand house. The butler, Harrison, greeted her at the door. He was an older man with silver hair and a dignified manner. His eyes were kind, which immediately made Eleanor feel slightly better. "Welcome, miss," he said. "The Count is waiting in the chapel. If you will follow me." Eleanor walked through hallways filled with paintings and tapestries. Her footsteps echoed on marble floors. Everything spoke of wealth and history. She felt very small and very out of place. The chapel was tiny and beautiful. Candles burned on the altar. A priest stood waiting, and there, standing perfectly still, was Count Sebastian Winters. Eleanor's breath caught. He was tall and broad-shouldered. His dark hair was slightly too long, as if he did not care much about his appearance anymore. His face was handsome but stern, with deep lines around his mouth. His eyes were clear blue, but they stared straight ahead without focusing on anything. He stood with the stillness of someone who had learned not to move unnecessarily in his darkness. He did not turn when Eleanor entered, but his head tilted slightly. He was listening. The ceremony was brief and businesslike. Eleanor spoke her vows in a trembling voice. Sebastian spoke his in a flat, emotionless tone. They were declared husband and wife. Sebastian did not attempt to kiss her. He simply held out his arm, and Eleanor took it carefully. His arm was solid and warm under her hand. They walked together to the dining room for a wedding dinner attended only by Lady Pembroke and Harrison. Dinner was awkward and silent. Eleanor barely ate. She watched her new husband's face, trying to understand what he was thinking. He ate carefully, his movements precise and practiced. He had learned to navigate his blindness with dignity. After dinner, Lady Pembroke left. Harrison showed Eleanor to the Countess's chambers. They were beautiful and large, decorated in soft blues and creams. A fire crackled in the fireplace. A large bed dominated one side of the room. Eleanor's small bags looked ridiculous in such grandeur. The Count's chambers are connected through that door, Harrison said, pointing. He asked me to tell you that he will not disturb you tonight or any night unless you wish it. He understands this marriage is one of convenience. Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. She was relieved and oddly disappointed at the same time. Harrison paused at the door. My lady, if I may speak freely, the Count is a good man. He has suffered much, but underneath the pain there is still kindness. I hope you will give him a chance. Then he left, and Eleanor was alone in her new life. She did not sleep well that first night. She lay in the enormous bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the connecting door, she heard nothing. Was Sebastian awake too? Was he regretting this marriage already? Did he wonder what his new wife looked like, since he could never see her? In the morning, a lady's maid came to help Eleanor dress. The woman's name was Mary, and she was cheerful and talkative. She brought breakfast on a tray and told Eleanor that the Count usually ate in his study. Will I see him today? Eleanor asked hesitantly. Oh yes, my lady. He has requested that you join him for tea this afternoon. He wants to speak with you. Eleanor spent the morning exploring her rooms and trying not to be nervous. What would she say to her husband? What would he say to her? At 3 o'clock, Mary led Eleanor to Sebastian's study. It was a large room filled with books. A fire burned in the fireplace. Sebastian sat behind his desk, his hands folded in front of him. He wore a simple brown coat and white shirt. He looked less intimidating than he had at the wedding. Come in, he said when Mary knocked. Somehow he knew exactly where Eleanor was standing. Please, sit. Eleanor sat in the chair across from him. A tea service waited on a small table between them. She poured tea with shaking hands. She did not know if she should offer him a cup or if he would find that insulting. I can pour my own tea, Sebastian said, as if reading her mind. I have learned to manage most things. I am not completely helpless. I did not think you were, Eleanor replied softly. Sebastian's head tilted toward her. You have a gentle voice, soft. It is the first thing I noticed about you when you entered the chapel yesterday. Eleanor did not know what to say to that. No one had ever complimented her voice before. I want to establish some understanding between us, Sebastian continued. I know this marriage is not what either of us would have chosen freely, but we are married now, and we must find a way to live together. I will make no demands on you. You may live as you wish in this house. All I ask is that you dine with me occasionally, so I am not always alone. Is that acceptable? Yes, Eleanor whispered. More than acceptable. Thank you. Sebastian nodded. He picked up his teacup with steady hands. "Tell me about yourself. What are your interests? What do you enjoy?" Eleanor hesitated. No one had asked her such questions in years. "I enjoy reading," she said finally, "and I like to walk in gardens. I used to play the piano before." She stopped. Before her stepmother forbade it because the sound annoyed her. "Before what?" Sebastian prompted. "Before I lived with my stepmother. She did not approve of music in the house." Sebastian frowned. "Was she cruel to you?" Eleanor did not answer immediately. She was surprised by his directness. "She was not kind," she admitted. "Then I am glad you are here now," Sebastian said quietly. "No one will be unkind to you in my house. You are the Countess. You will be treated with respect." Something warm bloomed in Eleanor's chest. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten. Hope. They talked for another hour. The conversation was stilted and awkward, but it was not unkind. Sebastian asked questions and listened carefully to Eleanor's answers. Eleanor found herself relaxing slightly. When she mentioned that she enjoyed reading poetry, Sebastian's expression softened. "I miss reading," he said. "It was one of my greatest pleasures before the accident. Now Harrison sometimes reads to me, but it is not the same." "I could read to you," Eleanor offered before she could stop herself. "If you would like." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed his stern face. "I would like that very much." In the days that followed, Eleanor and Sebastian fell into a routine. Each afternoon, Eleanor came to his study and read aloud. She started with poetry, then moved to novels. Sebastian listened intently, sometimes asking her to repeat a passage or describe a scene more fully. Eleanor discovered that she loved reading aloud. She loved choosing different voices for different characters. She loved watching Sebastian's face change as he listened, seeing emotions flicker across his features. Sebastian discovered that he loved the sound of Eleanor's voice. It was warm and expressive. It brought color back into his dark world. When she read, he could almost see the scenes she described. Slowly, they began to talk more between reading. Sebastian asked about Eleanor's childhood. She told him about her mother, who had died when Eleanor was young. She described her father, who had been kind but weak, unable to protect Eleanor from her stepmother's cruelty. She spoke carefully about the years of loneliness and hurt. Sebastian listened with growing anger, not at Eleanor, but at the people who had treated her so badly. He began to understand that she had suffered in her own way, just as he had suffered. In turn, Sebastian told Eleanor about his life before the accident. He had been wild and carefree, he admitted. He had loved riding fast horses and taking risks. The accident happened during a fox hunt when his horse was startled by a snake. Sebastian was thrown and struck his head on a rock. When he woke up, the world was gone. "I was angry for a long time," Sebastian confessed. "I raged at everyone. I threw things and shouted. I wanted everyone to feel my pain. But anger is exhausting. Eventually I just became quiet. I hid away here and tried to forget the life I had lost." "You are still young," Eleanor said gently. "Your life is not over." "It feels over," Sebastian replied. "What kind of life can a blind man have?" "A different life," Eleanor answered. "But perhaps not a worse one. Perhaps just different." Sebastian was quiet, considering her words. One afternoon, Eleanor finished reading a chapter and set the book aside. She noticed that Sebastian's hair had fallen across his forehead. Without thinking, she reached out and brushed it back. Her fingers barely touched his skin, but Sebastian froze. "I am sorry," Eleanor gasped, pulling back. "I should not have—" "No," Sebastian interrupted. His voice was rough. It is all right. I am not used to being touched. Not anymore. Eleanor understood. People probably avoided touching him now, afraid of offending him or reminding him of his blindness. But touch was one of his only connections to the world now. It seemed cruel to deny him that. "May I?" Eleanor asked softly. She reached out again, waiting for permission. Sebastian nodded, his jaw tight. Eleanor gently smoothed his hair back. Her fingers lingered for just a moment. Sebastian's eyes closed. His breath came faster. When Eleanor pulled away, his hand caught hers. "Thank you," he whispered. That small touch changed something between them. After that day, there were more touches. Eleanor would guide Sebastian's hand to his teacup. Sebastian would offer Eleanor his arm when they walked in the garden together. Each touch was brief and proper, but each touch mattered. The servants noticed the change. Mary whispered to cook that the Count smiled more now. Harrison mentioned to the housekeeper that the Count's step seemed lighter. The entire house felt warmer and brighter. Eleanor bloomed like a flower that had been kept in darkness and finally found sun. She wore the beautiful gowns that Sebastian had ordered made for her. She walked through the manor with her head held high. She was the Countess, and for the first time in her life she felt valued. Sebastian found himself thinking about Eleanor constantly. He memorized the rustle of her skirts, so he knew when she entered a room. He learned to recognize her footsteps in the hallway. He waited eagerly for their afternoon readings, counting the hours until he could hear her voice again. One evening, they sat together in the drawing room after dinner. A fire crackled cheerfully. Eleanor was embroidering while Sebastian sat in his favorite chair. It was peaceful and domestic. It was exactly the kind of moment Sebastian had thought he would never have. "Eleanor," Sebastian said suddenly. "Yes? Are you happy here?" Eleanor looked up from her embroidery. She studied Sebastian's face. He looked vulnerable and uncertain, younger than his 32 years. "I am happier than I have ever been," Eleanor answered honestly. "You have given me kindness when I expected coldness. You have given me respect when I expected contempt." "Yes, Sebastian, I am happy." Sebastian's throat worked. "I am glad. I want you to be happy." "Are you happy?" Eleanor asked. Sebastian considered the question carefully. "I am less lonely than I was. That is something." "It is something," Eleanor agreed. She set down her embroidery. "Sebastian, may I ask you a question?" "Of course." "The portrait you ordered before our wedding. Have you looked at it?" Sebastian laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "I cannot look at anything, Eleanor. I meant, has anyone described it to you?" "No. I had it placed in my chambers, but I have not asked anyone about it. I suppose I was afraid of what I might hear. Afraid they would tell me my wife was plain or unremarkable, and I would have to live with that knowledge." Eleanor felt a familiar pang. Of course he would assume she was plain. Why else would a woman of good family agree to marry a blind recluse? "Would you like me to describe it to you?" Eleanor offered quietly. Sebastian hesitated. "Have you seen it?" "No, I was never shown the finished portrait. But I could look at it and tell you what the painter captured." "I do not want to make you uncomfortable." "You will not," Eleanor promised. They went together to Sebastian's chambers. It was the first time Eleanor had entered this room. It was masculine and spare, decorated in dark blues and greys. The portrait hung above the fireplace. Eleanor stopped walking. She stared at the painting with shock. "What is it?" Sebastian asked. He sensed her stillness. "Sebastian," Eleanor breathed. "This is not me." "What do you mean?" Eleanor stepped closer to the portrait. The painting showed a young woman with Eleanor's dark hair and similar features, but the face in the portrait was beautiful. The artist had painted Eleanor's eyes larger and brighter, her lips fuller, her skin luminous. The woman in the portrait looked serene and lovely, like a fairy tale princess. "The painter changed how I look," Eleanor explained. "He made me beautiful. This is not what I really look like." Sebastian frowned. "Are you certain?" "I know my own face," Eleanor said softly. "I have spent enough years being told how plain it is. This portrait is a fantasy." Sebastian walked forward carefully until he stood beside Eleanor. Perhaps the painter saw something others missed. Perhaps he painted what he truly saw when he looked at you. Or perhaps he wanted to please you with a beautiful bride, even if it was a lie, Eleanor countered. Sebastian reached out and found Eleanor's arm. His hand slid down to hers. He held her hand gently. "Tell me truly, what do you look like?" Eleanor swallowed hard. This was cruel, she thought, to describe her own plainness to her husband. But he had asked, and she would not lie. "I have dark brown hair that is thick and difficult to manage," she began. "My eyes are brown, but they are small and set deep in my face. My nose is too long, my mouth is too wide, my face is too thin. I have been told many times that I am not pretty." Sebastian listened carefully. Then he lifted his hands and held them in the air. "May I?" Eleanor understood. He wanted to touch her face, to see her the only way he could. Her heart pounded. Yes. Sebastian's hands found Eleanor's face. His fingers were gentle as they traced her features. He touched her forehead, her eyebrows, the bridge of her nose. He followed the line of her jaw and the curve of her lips. Eleanor stood perfectly still, barely breathing. His touch was so tender, it made her want to cry. "Your face is not thin," Sebastian said quietly. "It is delicate. Your nose is not too long. It is elegant. Your mouth is generous, not too wide. And your eyes, I cannot judge their size, but the skin around them is soft." His hands cupped her face. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "You feel beautiful to me," Sebastian whispered. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever called her beautiful. She had never expected to hear such words. "You are kind to say so." "I am not being kind. I am being truthful." Sebastian's hands dropped away. The portrait does not matter. Whatever it shows, it is just paint and canvas. The real you is standing here with me. And the real you is the person who reads to me every afternoon. The person who touches my hair with gentle fingers. The person who makes this house feel like a home again. That is what matters. Eleanor could not stop the tears now. They rolled down her cheeks, but they were good tears, healing tears. Sebastian heard her quiet sob. Concern filled his face. "Did I upset you?" "No," Eleanor managed. "You gave me something I never thought I would have." "What is that?" "Someone who sees me, really sees me." Sebastian pulled Eleanor into his arms. It was the first time he had held her. She fit against his chest perfectly. Eleanor wrapped her arms around him and let herself rest in his embrace. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in front of the portrait that did not matter anymore. From that night forward, everything changed. The walls between them crumbled. They spent every possible moment together. They walked in the gardens every morning, Eleanor describing the flowers and Sebastian listening intently. They had all their meals together. They sat by the fire in the evenings, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Sebastian began to laugh again. Real laughter, not the bitter sounds from before. Eleanor made him laugh with stories from her childhood and observations about the servants' gossip. The sound of his laughter made Eleanor's heart sing. Eleanor became more confident. She gave orders to the servants without hesitation. She rearranged furniture to make Sebastian's navigation easier. She was no longer the frightened girl who had arrived weeks ago. She was the Countess Winters, and she wore the role beautifully. One afternoon they were walking in the garden when Sebastian stopped suddenly. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Sebastian turned toward her. His hands found hers. "I am falling in love with you." "No, that is not quite right. I have already fallen. I am deeply, completely in love with you." Eleanor's breath caught. "Sebastian, I know this was supposed to be a marriage of convenience," Sebastian continued quickly. "I know I promised make no demands, but I cannot pretend anymore. Every moment with you is precious. Your voice is the first thing I want to hear in the morning, and the last thing I want to hear at night. When you are not with me, I feel incomplete. I love you, Eleanor. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone." Eleanor's heart felt too big for her chest. "Oh, Sebastian, I love you too. I have loved you for weeks now, but I was afraid to say it. I thought perhaps you only valued me as a companion, not as a wife." Sebastian pulled her close. His hands framed her face again. "May I kiss you?" "Please," Eleanor whispered. Sebastian lowered his head and found her lips with his. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of all the emotion they had been holding back. Eleanor's hands clutched Sebastian's coat. She poured everything she felt into that kiss, all her love and gratitude and joy. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Sebastian rested his forehead against Eleanor's eyes. "I never thought I would feel this way again. I thought my life was over, but you brought me back to life." "You saved me too," Eleanor replied. "You gave me a home and kindness when I had nothing. You made me believe I was worth something." "You are worth everything," Sebastian said fiercely. "You are worth more than all my lands and titles combined." They kissed again, longer this time. The garden around them bloomed with late spring flowers. Birds sang in the trees. The world was beautiful, and they were together, and for the first time in both their lives, they felt complete. 3 weeks after their declarations of love, a letter arrived that shattered their peace. Harrison brought it to Eleanor while she was having tea in the morning room. His expression was worried. "My lady, this arrived from Lady Ashworth. I thought you should read it immediately." Eleanor's hands shook as she opened the letter. As she read, her face went pale. The letter was short and cruel. Lady Ashworth wrote that she and Eleanor's stepsisters would be arriving at Thornfield Manor in 2 days for a visit. She wanted to see how Eleanor was settling into her new position. The tone made it clear that this was not a friendly visit. It was an inspection. Eleanor showed the letter to Sebastian when he joined her for tea. His jaw tightened as Harrison read it aloud. "You do not have to see them," Sebastian said firmly. "This is your home. You can refuse to receive them." "If I refuse, they will spread rumors," Eleanor replied. Her voice was tight with anxiety. "They will say terrible things about both of us. Lady Ashworth has connections in society. She could damage your reputation." "I do not care about my reputation." "But I care about yours," Eleanor insisted. "You have been kind to me. I will not let my family hurt you." Sebastian reached across the table and found Eleanor's hand. "Then we will face them together. They cannot hurt you anymore. You are not alone." But Eleanor felt the old fears creeping back. She had spent so many years being belittled by her stepfamily. The thought of seeing them again made her feel small and powerless. 2 days later, Lady Ashworth arrived with Judith and Margaret. They swept into Thornfield Manor like a cold wind. Eleanor met them in the drawing room with Sebastian beside her. She held his arm tightly, drawing strength from his presence. Lady Ashworth's sharp eyes swept over the room. calculating the wealth and status she saw. Then her gaze landed on Eleanor. Her lip curled in her familiar expression of disdain. "Eleanor," Lady Ashworth said. She did not curtsy to Eleanor, though Eleanor was now her social superior. "How well you look." The words were meant to be insulting. They suggested that Eleanor had no right to look well, no right to be happy. Judith and Margaret stared at Eleanor with barely concealed jealousy. They saw her fine gown and the beautiful room, and the handsome Count at her side. They had expected to find Eleanor living in misery. Instead, she looked radiant. "Welcome to Thornfield Manor," Eleanor said. Her voice only shook slightly. "May I introduce my husband, Count Sebastian Winters?" Sebastian bowed, though he could not see who he was bowing to. "You are welcome in our home." The word "our" was not lost on Lady Ashworth. Her eyes narrowed. Tea was served. The conversation was tense and full of barely veiled insults. Lady Ashworth questioned everything from the decoration of the rooms to the quality of the food. She asked Sebastian inappropriate questions about his blindness, as if he were not sitting right there. "It must be so difficult for you," Lady Ashworth said with false sympathy. "Unable to see your own wife, you must rely entirely on others to tell you what she looks like." "I know what my wife looks like," Sebastian replied coldly. "I know everything important about her." "But surely you must wonder if she is truly attractive," Margaret added sweetly. "After all, you cannot see for yourself." Eleanor felt her old insecurities rising. She knew what they were doing. They were trying to plant doubt in Sebastian's mind. They wanted him to question whether Eleanor was worthy of him. "My wife is beautiful," Sebastian said firmly. "But even if she were not, I would love her just the same. Her beauty is the least interesting thing about her." Judith laughed. How convenient for Eleanor to find a husband who cannot see her plain face. Eleanor flinched. The words cut deep, reopening old wounds. Sebastian's hand tightened on his teacup. "You will not speak to my wife that way. She is a countess. You will show her respect." "Respect?" Lady Ashworth scoffed. "She was barely fit to be a servant in my house. Now she plays at being nobility." "It is quite amusing." Sebastian stood abruptly. Eleanor gasped, afraid he would stumble, but he stood steady and tall. His face was cold with fury. "Harrison, please show our guests to their rooms. They will be leaving first thing in the morning." "We just arrived," Lady Ashworth protested. "And now you will leave. I will not have anyone insult my wife under my own roof." Sebastian's voice was hard as iron. "You are no longer welcome here." The visit ended in chaos. Lady Ashworth raged. Judith and Margaret cried, but Harrison and the footman firmly escorted them to their rooms and made it clear they would be watching until the family departed in the morning. After they were gone, Eleanor collapsed into a chair. Her whole body shook. Sebastian knelt beside her, his hands finding hers. "They cannot hurt you anymore," he said urgently. "You are beyond their reach now." But that night Eleanor lay awake, tormented by doubt. Lady Ashworth's words echoed in her head. Plain face, barely fit to be a servant, playing at being nobility. The old voices of shame grew louder and louder until Eleanor could not silence them. What if Margaret was right? What if Sebastian only loved her because he could not see her? What if someday he regained his sight and was disappointed by what he saw? The next morning, Eleanor watched from her window as her stepfamily's carriage pulled away. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt hollow. At breakfast, Sebastian sensed something was wrong. "Eleanor, are you well?" "I am fine," Eleanor lied. But she was not fine. As the days passed, Eleanor withdrew into herself. The doubts planted by her stepfamily grew like poisonous weeds. She began avoiding Sebastian, making excuses not to read to him or walk with him. She told herself she was protecting him from being tied to someone unworthy. Sebastian felt Eleanor pulling away. He did not understand what had changed. He tried to reach her, but she kept slipping through his fingers like water. The house that had been so warm and full of laughter became cold and quiet again. 1 week after the terrible visit, Sebastian could bear it no longer. He came to Eleanor's room late at night and knocked on the connecting door. "Eleanor, please, let me in. We need to talk." Eleanor opened the door reluctantly. Sebastian entered and closed the door behind him. Even in his darkness, he could sense her pain. "Tell me what is wrong," Sebastian pleaded. "Tell me why you are shutting me out." "I am not shutting you out." "You are. I can feel it. What did they say to you? What poison did they plant in your mind?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "They reminded me of the truth. I am plain and ordinary. You deserve someone better, someone beautiful, who can be a credit to you in society." Sebastian's face showed raw pain. "Is that truly what you think? That I care about such shallow things? How can you not care?" Eleanor cried. "You are blind, Sebastian. You cannot see me. You don't know what I really look like. What if someday you could see again? What if you looked at me and felt disappointed?" Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Come with me, I want to show you something." He held out his hand. After a moment, Eleanor took it. Sebastian led her carefully through the hallway to his chambers. He brought her to stand in front of the portrait above the fireplace. "Look at that painting," Sebastian commanded. "Tell me what you see." "We have discussed this already," Eleanor said wearily. "The painter made me look beautiful. It is not accurate. Look again. Look closely. What do you see?" Eleanor forced herself to study the portrait. She saw the idealized version of herself staring back. The perfect features, the serene expression. "I see a lie," she whispered. "I see something different," Sebastian said. "I see a woman the painter looked at for 3 days. 3 days of studying your face, trying to capture what he saw, and what he saw was not a lie. He saw the beauty that shines through you, not in the shape of your nose or the size of your eyes, but in your expression, in the kindness and strength that live in your face." Sebastian's hands found Eleanor's shoulders. He turned her to face him. "You ask what would happen if I could see again," Sebastian continued. "I will tell you. I would look at you, and I would see the face of the woman I love, the woman who brought light back into my darkness, the woman who makes me laugh, the woman whose voice I want to hear every day for the rest of my life. Your face would be beautiful to me, because it is yours, because it belongs to the person my heart has chosen." Tears streamed down Eleanor's cheeks. "How can you be so certain?" "Because love is not about seeing with your eyes," Sebastian said fiercely. "It is about seeing with your heart. I see you more clearly than anyone ever has, Eleanor. I see your courage. I see your gentle spirit. I see how you treat the servants with kindness and how you care for me with such tenderness. That is what matters. That is what lasts." Sebastian pulled Eleanor close. His lips found her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you," he said between kisses. "I love you, I love you, I love you. Not despite your face, not without knowing your face. I love you completely. Exactly as you are." Eleanor clung to Sebastian and finally let herself believe him. She had spent so many years listening to cruel voices tell her she was worthless. It was time to listen to a voice that told her the truth. She was loved. She was valued. She was enough. The next morning, Eleanor woke with new determination. She would not let her stepfamily's cruelty poison her marriage anymore. She belonged here. She deserved this happiness, and she would fight to keep it. At breakfast, Eleanor told Sebastian her decision. "I want to throw a ball. A proper ball here at Thornfield Manor. I want to introduce you back into society as my husband. I want everyone to see that we are happy together." Sebastian was surprised. "Are you certain? You know people will talk. They will gossip about the blind count and his wife." "Let them talk," Eleanor said boldly. "Let them say what they want. We know the truth. We know what we have together." Sebastian smiled. It was a real smile, bright and full of joy. "Then we will have a ball. We will show them all." The preparations took 3 weeks. Eleanor threw herself into the planning with energy she did not know she possessed. She ordered decorations and planned menus. She sent invitations to all the important families in the county. She even invited Lady Ashworth and her stepsisters, though she hoped they would not come. They came, of course. Lady Ashworth would not miss an opportunity to criticize. The night of the ball, Thornfield Manor glowed with light. Hundreds of candles illuminated the ballroom, flowers covered every surface, musicians tuned their instruments, servants stood ready to greet guests. Eleanor wore a gown of deep sapphire blue. Mary had arranged her hair in an elegant style. Eleanor looked at herself in the mirror, and for the first time in her life she thought she looked almost pretty. Not because her features had changed, but because happiness had transformed her from within. Sebastian waited for her at the top of the stairs. He wore formal black evening clothes that made him look devastatingly handsome. When Eleanor took his arm, he squeezed her hand. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "I can sense it." "How can you sense how I look?" Eleanor asked, amused. "I can sense your confidence. It radiates from you like warmth from the sun." They descended the stairs together as guests began to arrive. Eleanor introduced Sebastian to each person. She described them quietly so he would know who he was speaking to. Sebastian charmed everyone with his wit and intelligence. People who had expected to find a tragic, bitter man were surprised to discover someone full of life and laughter. Lady Ashworth arrived with Judith and Margaret. They looked sour as they saw the grand ball and the happy couple. They had hoped to find Eleanor failing. Instead, she was thriving. Throughout the evening, Eleanor stayed at Sebastian's side. She was his eyes, describing the room and the guests. But she was also more than that. She was his partner, his equal. Everyone who saw them together could see the love between them. At one point, Lady Ashworth cornered Eleanor near the refreshment table. "You seem quite pleased with yourself," she said coldly. "I am happy," Eleanor replied simply. "Is that so surprising? You have forgotten your place. You are playing a role, acting like you belong in this world." Eleanor drew herself up tall. She looked her stepmother in the eye, without fear. "I am not playing a role. I am the Countess Winters. This is my home. These are my guests. And that man there, the one who is laughing with the Duke of Pemberton, is my husband. He loves me, truly loves me. Not because I am beautiful or accomplished, but because of who I am inside. That is something you will never understand." Lady Ashworth's face twisted with fury. "You are still the same plain, worthless girl you always were." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "I am not worthless. I never was. You tried to break me, but you failed. I survived you, and now I am free." Eleanor walked away without looking back. She returned to Sebastian's side and took his arm. He sensed her presence immediately and smiled down at her. "Is everything all right?" he asked quietly. "Everything is perfect," Eleanor replied, and she meant it. Later that night, after all the guests had left, Sebastian and Eleanor stood alone in the ballroom. The candles were burning low. The musicians had packed up their instruments. The servants were cleaning quietly around them. "We did it," Eleanor said. She leaned against Sebastian's shoulder. "We showed them all that we belong together." "We did more than that," Sebastian replied. He turned to face Eleanor, his hands finding her face with the familiarity of long practice. "We showed them what real love looks like. Not the shallow, surface kind that depends on appearances, but the deep kind that sees into someone's soul." Sebastian knelt down on one knee. Eleanor gasped in surprise. "We married out of convenience," Sebastian said. "But I want to choose you again, not because I need an heir, or because my aunt arranged it. I choose you because you are the other half of my heart. Eleanor, will you stay married to me? Will you choose me too?" Eleanor was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, yes, I choose you. I will always choose you." Sebastian stood and swept Eleanor into his arms. He spun her around as she laughed. Then he kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and passion into that kiss. Eleanor kissed him back with equal fervor. They had found each other in the darkness. They had chosen love over fear, and now nothing could separate them. "I have something to tell you," Eleanor said when they finally pulled apart. Her voice was shy but excited. "I have been feeling unwell in the mornings lately. The doctor came to examine me yesterday. Sebastian, I am with child." Sebastian's face went through a dozen emotions: shock, joy, wonder, fear, and overwhelming love. "Truly, we are going to have a baby." "Yes," Eleanor confirmed, "in about 6 months." Sebastian's hands moved to Eleanor's stomach, resting there gently. "A child. Our child." His voice cracked with emotion. "I never thought I would have this. A family. A real family filled with love." "You have it now," Eleanor whispered. "We have it now, together." The months that followed were the happiest of their lives. Eleanor's belly grew round with their child. Sebastian was endlessly fascinated by the changes in her body. He would rest his hands on her stomach and feel the baby kick. He talked to their unborn child, telling stories and singing soft songs. The portrait that had started everything still hung above the fireplace in Sebastian's chambers. But neither of them looked at it anymore. It did not matter what the painting showed. What mattered was the real love they had built together. When their daughter was born on a sunny morning in May, Sebastian held her with trembling hands. "What does she look like?" he asked Eleanor eagerly. Eleanor studied their tiny daughter's face. "She has your nose and your dark hair, but she has my eyes. Is she beautiful?" Eleanor smiled. She thought of all the years she had been called plain. She thought of the portrait that had tried to make her into something she was not. She thought of how Sebastian had taught her that beauty was so much more than features and form. "She is perfect," Eleanor said softly. "Absolutely perfect, just as she is." Sebastian kissed his daughter's forehead, then reached out to pull Eleanor close. His family, his home, his heart. "I love you," he told Eleanor. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved me first," Eleanor replied. "We saved each other." Outside the window, spring flowers bloomed in the garden. Birds sang in the trees. Inside Thornfield Manor, a family had been created from pain and loneliness. Two broken people had found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful together. The portrait on the wall was just paint on canvas, but the love they shared was real and true and permanent. It was a love that saw beyond appearances into the heart. It was a love that chose kindness over cruelty. It was a love that transformed everything it touched, and it was a love that would last forever. Years later, when their daughter was old enough to ask questions, she pointed at the portrait above the fireplace. "Mama, who is that beautiful lady?" Eleanor smiled at Sebastian. He smiled back, his blind eyes seeing everything that mattered. "That," Eleanor said, "is a picture of the woman your father fell in love with. But the real story is much better than any portrait could ever show." And she told their daughter the truth, that love is not about seeing with your eyes, it is about seeing with your heart. That true beauty lives in kindness and courage and gentle strength. That sometimes the best things in life come from the darkest places, and that happy endings are possible even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. The blind count had ordered a portrait of his future wife, but what appeared on the canvas was not nearly as beautiful or true as what appeared in his heart. The portrait showed a face, but his heart held everything real and precious and worth keeping, and that made all the difference.